Good morning and welcome. Good afternoon, maybe, but welcome to the Educator's Edge, where the goal of this podcast is to help you teach smarter, lead brighter, grow stronger. Hi, I'm Lisa Ellum. I'm your go-to guide, your learning bestie, here to bring you the art and science of adult education in a way that's practical, insightful, and empowering. Whether you're building your teaching business, boosting your confidence, or mastering the craft, you're in the right place. My drive is to build sustainability in adult learning. I see educators as key, hence my purpose for this podcast is to empower professional and entrepreneurial educators to excel in the art and science of adult education and learning, fostering transformative experiences that inspire growth and impact. So let's dive into podcast number 9. Today's topic is trying to bridge the gap of supporting adult learners in the workplace. It's all about workplace learning. We're going to look at creating that psychological safety, what that looks like, how that feels. We're going to examine what happens when things go wrong in the workplace for adult learners and the role of the educator in that place. And finally, we'll conclude that workplace learning is really such a powerful experience for the learner, but it bridges the gap between theory and practice. It also bridges the gap between workplace and learning institution. And that relationship between the workplace and the learning institution, the key is the learner. And who supports the learner is the educator. So let's dive in. So for adult learners, the workplace can be both a robust learning environment and complex, challenging. Being able to apply theory to practice is an active process that requires thoughtful guidance and reflection and real-world engagement. So as educators, supervisors, mentors, we have a unique opportunity and responsibility to help learners consolidate what they know with what they do. So how do we make workplace learning truly meaningful? I have some key strategies that I want to talk about, just introduce. I've also written about them so you can download that information as well. But yeah, just quickly going over. So the key strategies for bridging theory to practice and minimizing that gap and enhancing workplace learning experiences for students in the meanwhile. So the first thing, and I think I've already introduced the idea, is creating psychological safety. Because before any learning can occur, learners need to feel safe. Psychological safety is foundational. It allows students to ask questions, make mistakes, and grow from these. Now, the neuroscience, I'm into the neuroscience, but it's just fascinating. Neuroscience says that when learners feel threatened or judged, the brain activates a stress response that actually shuts down that higher order thinking. So a safe, supportive environment opens the door to critical reflection and deeper understanding. So for the educators, how do we do that? The tip is to lead with curiosity, invite questions, model vulnerability, and reassure learners that not all knowing is part of the process. As Carol Dweck teaches, it's about embracing that learner mindset, which allows curiosity and learning instead of the fixed mindset, which puts up barriers. So make it safe for people to make mistakes, to ask questions. The second tip is one that's really important for me, is the use of structured reflection. Reflection bridges the experience with insight. So, encouraging learners to pause, to make sense of what they're experienced and connect it to their knowledge. How do we do this? I think we do it in two ways, and I think both ways work well together. That is, we need to use both ways. The first way is the verbal reflection. The second way is the written reflection. So the verbal debrief, I like to debrief with students maybe twice a week and touch in with them daily. We don't just debrief. We encourage learners to, reflect on what's happening, the good, the bad, the ugly. And then with the written part of the reflection, it's about going a little bit deeper. It's about writing it down, but also doing some research. Now, we can use formulas like Sprout or reflective journals or voice memes or video reflections. Anything like that can deepen insights and track growth. But those reflections where we ask students to do a little bit of research and find out why, I think helps consolidate the lessons that we're learning in the workplace. The third is to model thinking out loud. We often assume that adult students get it by watching us work, but they can't see the internal reasoning. So if a teacher can really impact the learners by narrating the decision-making process. It makes that invisible thinking visible. So, for example, going in with my students in the workplace, I might say something like, I am choosing to escalate this case because the patient's vital signs are changing. And based on X protocol, this could indicate Y. So we invite learners to think aloud too, and it gives you and the learner insight to their understanding, and it helps identify some misconceptions early. And it also invites that curiosity, to use their workplace mentors as tools for learning, develop that relationship that enables that learner mindset to really blossom. So my fourth tip is to provide timely, constructive feedback. Now, adult learners often value feedback that is specific, it's relevant, and it's actionable. Timelessness is crucial. Feedback given days later may lose context and impact. I always think about when, I'm training my dog. If I can reward her straight away, then she understands what the reward is for. Same with people. If you're going to punish someone or chastise them or give them criticism later when they've forgotten the incident, then the value is minimised. So the teaching tip here, once again, is use some structure when giving the feedback. The SBI model is helpful. It's just remembering that situation, what happened, the behaviour and the impact, and it helps structure your feedback. Whatever model you choose to use, try and remove the emotion and just get back to the facts of what happened. Situation, what you saw, and the impact of that. So my fifth tip is looking at co-creating learning goals. In any learning activity, and especially in workplace learning, if a student can be goal-directed, then they're going to be able to measure their growth, and they're going to be able to physically tick stuff off. I've achieved that. I've done this. Adult learners bring their own experiences and goals to, and expectations to the workplace. So I think it's important to collaboratively have goals, because this goal setting increases motivation and ownership. And if we can do it as a group, or even if we can do it together, it increases the importance, therefore increasing the motivation. And it's really helping learners own their learning success. So, for example, it might be something like, what's one thing you want to get to know more confidently this placement? Yeah, it might be, well, in nursing, it might be, becoming more confident with using medications. So, what's the strategy? What's the steps? What do we have to do to build that confidence? You can be overwhelmed with the amount of medications, but if you get to know one medication a day, and if you've got a 20-day placement, you'll have 20 more new medications that you'll feel confident in using by the end of the day. So use their response to shape the support strategies and track their development. We hand the responsibility back to the learner. Tip number 6 is balance, challenge, and support. Too much challenge can lead to overwhelm. Too much support can stunt growth. The key to scaffolding learning is to gradually remove the support as the confidence builds. So the tip here, is to regularly check in. On a scale of 1 to 10, how supported are you feeling today? Or on a scale of 1 to 10, how are you growing? How is your confidence growing in the workplace? So, and we just, adjust the language as is applicable. Tip number 7 is recognizing our small wins. Theory, practice, integration doesn't happen in one aha moment, but it's a series of small, cumulative events, victories. So, and we need to celebrate them and make them realize that life is a learning process. We will always be learning, and help them to be vulnerable enough to accept this reality. So the tip is, at the end of each shift or session, end with a question. What are you proud of today? What's one thing you learned? I also encourage learners to get feedback from their mentors, their workplace mentors, the people that they're working with in the workplace. So, and we don't want to ask a question which is, how did I go today? Or we can start with that one, but what information is that going to give you? It's not going to give you a lot. And often if, people are busy, they might just say, look, thanks for your help. You did really well. I'm really grateful. And then we need to get a little bit deeper in that inquiry. How can I improve? And the professional will often be able to direct the learner with what they did well and how they can improve. Because, like I said, life is a learning journey. So, in a beautiful, perfect world, everything works out. But what happens when workplace learning doesn't go to plan? We've got to navigate the risk of bad habits in the workplace. Workplace learning is an essential bridge between theory and practice. But what happens when the bridge cracks? Not every learning environment is ideal. And when students and new professionals enter the workplace where best practices are inconsistent or overlooked, they risk picking up more than just practical skills. they might also adopt bad habits. Now, these bad habits might take the form of taking shortcuts to copy outdated methods, or just taking shortcuts. Poor role modelling can derail the whole intention of a meaningful workplace learning experience. As educators, mentors, and workplace supervisors, we need to be aware of the hidden curriculum students absorb and take active steps to protect their learning experience. So why? Why are bad habits emerging in the workplace? I'm quite sure you know the answer to this. Workplaces are busy, high-pressured environments. When staff are overworked or unsupported, they may fall into habitual behaviours that are inefficient. They might seem efficient, but they're not efficient. They don't always align with best practice. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer to do things the right way. Students observing this might not have had that critical lens or the confidence to question what they see. Instead, they mimic the actions to fit in and survive. And I know you know what I'm talking about. So, other contributing factors to this might be inadequate supervision. Maybe without proper guidance, learners imitate poor habits. Another thing might be the misalignment between academic content and real-world application. Learners may struggle to see how theory aligns and lean towards observable practices instead. And we've also got that culture of complacency in some workplaces. This is how it's always been done. They might teach you this way at university, but in the workplace, we do it this way. It saves time. This sort of culture of complacency overrides the reflective, evidence-based approaches. And as educators, we'd be naive to think that this doesn't happen. So what do we need to watch out for? Educators and mentors should look for the following. Our students, are they cutting corners? Are they skipping the essential steps? Are they normalising risky or outdated practices? Are they reviewing current policy and procedures? Do they disengage or have a lack of questioning? When they stop asking questions or they're disengaged, the educator needs to step in a little bit stronger. Inconsistencies between workplace practice and what is taught is, such a recurring theme that I hear when I'm supervising learning in the workplace. So how can we as educators and mentors intervene constructively? One, to create that safe and supportive learning environment. This is key. Even when educators cannot control the workplace settings, we can support students through pre-placement preparation. Can we equip the learners with critical thinking tools and reflective practice frameworks? Do we have the ongoing check-ins and create space for students to reflect and discuss their observations? Can we coach rather than correct? Can we use open-ended questionings and debriefing to guide students towards insight rather than judgment? Role model. Can we demonstrate best practices? And when possible, discuss why they matter. It's such an important. So these strategies to support high quality learning helps the learners to stay grounded, reflective in their learning, and we consider the future. How can we do this? I've talked a little bit before. A reflective journal, or at least a reflective writing practice, asking learners to capture what they saw, what they felt, and what questions arose. And then I push them a little bit further. What does the research say? We need to set up learning goals that align to both theory and workplace competencies. Are these goals achievable? What are the steps to achieve these goals? And what does it look like in the workplace when these goals have been achieved? I think in the classroom too, using case-based scenarios is really effective. It's really effective for learning, but it's also effective for the debrief, what if scenarios based on real workplace experience. What if this happened? And can we connect the students with multiple mentors? I think that diversity of voice can balance out one person's habits or perspectives. We've got to recognise the skill and knowledge in our workforce and employ that to help with that workplace learning. So I guess in the end, workplace learning is such a powerful tool, but it's not always perfect. Our workplaces are not perfect. Our learning systems are not perfect. When students encounter environments that model less than ideal behaviour, it can really undermine the integrity of the learning and the integrity of the profession. So by preparing learners, supporting them through reflective strategies, and staying closely connected to their workplace experiences, educators can bridge the gap and prevent theory from being replaced by poor practice. Thus, bridging the gap between theory and practice is really about creating meaning, mindset, mentorship, and technical skills. As educators, the most significant impact we make might not be what we teach, but instead how we show up. By creating connection, encouraging reflection, and supporting risk-taking, we build confident, capable, and compassionate learners ready to thrive in the complexity of the real world. Love to know your experiences of workplace learning. What has been successful and what hasn't? And what have you learnt from this? I thank you so much for joining me today, and I look forward to connecting again at another time.